Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today in Nashville, Tennessee, Johnathan Pushkar, which you and I have known each other for a few years now. We met at, I think it was a Dinner with Dreamers event.
That's correct.
Some years back, and got to know each other and hang out and have lunch, you and I and my wife. And you have accomplished something that I wanted to go down a couple different paths with you. One of them is, of course, you are a Lego aficionado.
That I am.
And have actually had some notoriety from that, which is kind of cool. I want to talk about that a little bit. But you are an independent artist in a major label world that has actually had some success and got a record deal with, I believe it's Gem Records, a year or two ago?
2019.
2019. So you're going to make me do the math. 3 years ago.
Depends when you're listening.
Yeah, that's true. And you are seeing some things getting accomplished that a lot of independent artists don't see, especially on an independent label. But let's back up a little bit before that. And your musical influences were...
Yeah, my musical influences definitely bleed through. My originals, very much, of course, the Fab Four, the Beatles, but also the Beach Boys. Basically, most of that mid-60s, 64, 65 pop rock wave. But then my curveball is Fountains of Wayne. They're the Stacy's Mom Has Got It Going On band. They're a huge influence on me as well. And of course, their bass player and 50/50 songwriter, Adam Schlesinger, also wrote the song That Thing You Do for the Tom Hanks movie.
Right.
Which is like, well, not like, it is definitively my all-time number one favorite song ever.
And there's actually a bit of, when you listen to your Straighten Up album, which was your debut album.
It was.
There's some musical influence based off of that film in the music that you wrote.
That's correct. You know, there are a couple moments in my life where I say that the world went from black and white to color, or I call them Ed Sullivan moments, if you will, because the music that I'm into, of course, a lot of my influences say, you know, we saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then we knew what we wanted to do. And so I, of course, wasn't alive to watch that on February 9th. But all these years later, I've had a couple moments along my timeline where I've gotten to experience that on a different personal level. And so That Thing You Do, the movie, was just one of those for me. I mean, every time I sit down to write a song that's oriented toward fast, pop, melodic, I think, how can I take that thumbprint and combine it with my own and create something new?
What do you think it was in particular about that movie? Because, as you said, you weren't there to see the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. I was. I remember my sister, my older sister, going crazy, just going nuts when they were on. She was a big fan. I mean, she loved Paul. And what was it about that movie that maybe triggered something that other things didn't? Because it's a fictitious movie. I mean, it's not a real band. It's actors playing kind of the Beatle-esque type.
And it's an amalgamation of several bands' stories.
Right.
Where, you know, like a great example is when they're playing on the big national TV show toward the end of the movie and they show everybody's names. When they show the lead singer, Jimmy, it says, "Sorry, girls, he's married," which, of course, is a reference to John Lennon on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they actually make it a big plot point of the movie. But to the point of, you know, my career and influence, I mean, the movie's phenomenal. It's incredible. You know, Tom Hanks was at the helm. The cast is incredible. But for me, that song just encapsulates really everything that makes for a good pop song, whether it's supposed to sound like it's 1965 or today. It's got all of these great, perfectly timed chord changes, major minor shifts. So many of the instruments work together in the production. I mean, you know, we could go on and on all night about how amazing that song is in its own right. But I think that, you know, for me talking about that song, you know, an artist that's listening to this now can think of that song for them that, you know, really kind of serves as a guiding light. Like, oh man, I can do this. It's like, a beacon that you can go back to every time. And, you know, when you're looking for what you want to do and what you want to create, to have that like anchor that you can go back to and be like, this is why I do what I do, this song or this album or this artist.
When did you realize at what age that you wanted to be an artist, that you wanted to get out there and record and perform and just go down that path?
This is a question that I love to hear other people answer because, you know, there's always like the trope of like, oh, you know, we artists are a little bit crazy, you know, we're a little out there. And I think that how people answer this question has a lot of definition for how they create art and the perspective that they come into it with. So to answer the question, I played in a Beatles tribute band all through high school, unsurprisingly, I'm sure.
What was your instrument of choice at that time? Was it guitar?
You should guess. What do you think? Which Beatle do you think I was?
Paul? George?
I was Ringo.
You were Ringo?
Yes, I was Ringo.
Oh.
So I was behind the kit, and my joke was, if I ever finished a show and I didn't have whiplash from dancing my head around all night, I didn't do a good enough job. But playing that live music was incredible, and of course it was all cover music, but that showed me the energy of an audience, watching people's eyes light up when you play that song, you know, whether it's Something or Please Please Me or whatever this case may be for each person in the audience. When they hear that song,
right,
getting to be a part of bringing that to people was incredible. And we were all teenagers, so what was fun was we would play these showcases with other bands our age. Of course, no disparaging to those bands or the bands they covered, but they played a lot of, you know, Blink-182 and things that were popular with people my age. And then we would get up and open with Please Please Me and then do, you know, a cover of Little Richard and then Twist and Shout. And so what would happen was the kids our age were supportive and they were there and enjoying the other bands our age, but the parents who owned the restaurants, the country clubs, the venues, really liked us because we played the songs that they knew. And so we ended up getting a lot of bookings where we'd be working as teenagers 3-4 weekends a month consistently all year. And so that was really fun as a 17-year-old to be going through that, playing the music that inspired me. But right around that time, I started to feel creatively compelled to start writing my own music. And unsurprisingly, it kind of took that 60s 12-string guitar.
The Rickenbacker type thing.
Yes, that's my calling card, if you will. Like, tonight is the first time I've ever left my house without it. No, I'm kidding. But not
you don't sleep with it, do you?
No, I don't. No, it's it doesn't make for a very good teddy bear.
No.
But
the E string keeps poking you in the eye.
Yeah. And there's two of them because it's a 12 string.
That's
so,
right,
you know. But yeah, I just started to feel creatively compelled to start doing my own material that kind of had that thumbprint. But at the time, I was growing up just south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's kind of interesting now that, you know, so many people have bedroom music studios. Not that there's anything wrong with that,
right.
But at least in my area at that time, finding anybody to record with was difficult. Like, you know, my mom would be like, oh, my friend's son has like a recording studio, and we'd like hang out and jam. And those were fun times. And I think getting in the studio as young as possible helps you kind of figure out the process for when you do go big league, if you will. And so, you know, to any young listeners, like, the sooner you can get in the studio, even if what you put out isn't released or if you just have it for your own need, working through the studio process is so important. So the sooner you can do it, the better. Again, even if it doesn't ever get released. But back to the story. I realized around that time that I wanted to create my own stuff, but there wasn't really any beacon that I had. You know, That Thing You Do super inspired me, but the movie came out in the 90s, and, you know, this was like the late 2010s. So it's like, you know, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
And I heard this song on Little Steven's Underground Garage, channel 21, Sirius XM, called She Can Do It All by an artist named Kurt Baker. And this is my other moment in life where the world went from black and white to color, Ed Sullivan moment, because here's this song that from the vocal performance to the songwriting to the production, it's everything I had in my head but didn't know it could be accomplished or that it could be done. And on top of all of that, I'm hearing it on the radio station that I listen to every single day. So not only was I hearing this amazing song that was inspiring me to continue the craft, but it showed me that to whatever varying degree of success you want to call it, it could be done. I could write something that sounded like the 60s and it could be played on radio. And so that's all I needed. I just needed to know it could happen in this day and age. And I doubled, maybe even tripled down on my, really 60s / Fountains of Wayne influenced style. And to make a long story short, I looked up everybody that had anything to do with that recording, which is definitely a tip I would give to any listeners. If something particularly moves you, see if you can get connected with the people that created it. Now, if you're talking about an A-list artist, the chances of them messaging you back on Instagram, not super high. But the producer on it, the mix engineer, the bass player, somebody affiliated with it, anything's possible in the digital age. So
it's so interesting that you bring that up, because as a kid in junior high, high school, and even in college, we still had vinyl and even CDs. When CDs came out, I would read the liner notes to see who played on it, who was the producer, my gosh, who's this Ted Templeton that keeps cranking out these great Doobie Brother albums, or, Greg Rowley on Santana, or Pat Metheny, who played with Joni Mitchell.
And I always loved the Goffin King story, where so many people thought that King would have been a guy, but of course it was Carole King.
Yeah, but you start looking at, you see these names over and over and over, and you start going, okay, there is a pattern here. There's a system that's in place, and all the great songs, kind of like the Wrecking Crew.
Oh, yeah.
You find that there's a lot of influential people playing on these, and you just want to dig deeper. Is that what you were kind of finding?
Very much so, and just kind of the parallel between your experience and mine, not to say that one is better or worse, but in this day and age, you can find those people's names and then try to find them through their website, through Instagram.
Oh, it's so much easier these days than it was back then.
So, there's always going to be pushes and pulls, pros and cons between the different times of the industry, but that is one thing that I think is majorly underutilized. One of my big life principles is, I don't like to let other people say no for me, and by that I mean the ask is always worth it. Doesn't mean it's always going to be a yes. In fact, most times it's not, or you don't get any response at all. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And so I like to ask, because you can roll the dice. You just don't know.
You recorded your first album, Straighten Up, which we briefly mentioned. And how did that album come together? Did you have a record deal going into that?
I did not. And so, fascinatingly, this jumps back right to where I left off in my progression story as an artist. So I heard that song, She Can Do It All by Kurt Baker, and that inspired me to finish the songs that you hear on this album. Of course, it took a couple years to do. As things progressed, I moved here to Nashville, Tennessee to go to Belmont University, where I graduated in 2018. And while I was here in Nashville, I happened to look up the producer and co-writer of that song, whose name is Wyatt Funderburk. And Wyatt has been my hero since I was 17, and now he's one of my best friends on the planet. And so to bridge that gap, we got together for coffee after I sent him a song, my very first single. I said, hey, you inspired this song, so if you have 3 minutes and 23 seconds and wouldn't mind giving it a listen, it'd really mean a lot. So long story short, we ended up getting together for coffee. He asked what my next plan was after my first single. This was years before my first album. And I said, I'd like to do a song a year if I can. Working through college, anybody that's been through college knows budget can be a little tight. So a song a year I thought was like a good way to keep chipping at the stone and not, put off till tomorrow what could be done today. He said, well, who's going to mix it? And my face had to turn white as a ghost because I had a feeling where that was going. And I said, well, I'm not there yet. And he goes, I'm going to be offended if you don't ask me to do it, right? And I'm like,
wow.
So, now he's one of my closest pals. And so, not to say that I don't hold him in the same light, but it's different now that we're friends.
Yeah.
But back then it was just another stepping stone for me as a young artist that man, this can happen. This can happen. You are just a Facebook message, an Instagram message. Whenever you're listening to this, maybe there's a new social media message away from things starting to move and starting to happen. And you just don't know if you don't ask and you don't reach out and you don't put your hand out for it to be shaken. So to answer your question about the first album, Wyatt ended up producing and mixing that album. I recorded about 60 to 70% of it in Pennsylvania and then brought the tracks here, and he and I kind of finished them together with that vision. And so the first single from that album is called The Girl Next Door. It's about the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I'm just a huge comic book fan, but specifically those movies. And I went to New York to film the music video in all the locations that they filmed those movies. So if you check out the music video, you'll see some familiar spots. And I had everything ready to go. The album artwork, all the songs, all the publishing, everything behind the scenes. And I had the date set. Couldn't tell you now because history's played out differently from what I had in mind at the time. And I reached out to some of the guys that I used to hear on Little Steven's Underground Garage and said, hey, if you were my age in this day and age, what are 3 things you wish that you knew and 3 things you wish you could tell yourself not to do? 3 things you wish you could do, 3 things you didn't wish you could do. And the people I reached out to all got back to me. So that's a big sticking point for this chapter of my career as we talk about it. Is you just don't know if you don't ask.
Right.
And so these guys said, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. I think this DJ would really like it. I think you should send it here. Here's an email address. I'll intro you here, da-da-da. And so, reaching out and having those connections made got the song to debut on Rodney Bingenheimer's show on the Little Steven's Underground Garage. Of course, Rodney is a classic rock staple, having, brought notoriety to Joan Jett, Tom Petty, Guns N' Roses. I mean, you name it, out of the late 70s through the 80s. He was the guy getting those people their start on radio, and maybe not at quite a big a scale as Guns N' Roses, but I can say the same because he played my song the week before it came out. So people could hear it and then couldn't go listen to it anywhere because it wasn't officially out yet.
Right.
But he played the song. And the next day I heard from a radio promoter who said, hey, I think that we could have some legs on this song. I'd love to talk to you about, doing a radio promotion campaign, but I also know of a record label in New Jersey that specializes in this kind of sound. And I don't know if this is the direction you want to take with it. I don't know what kind of plans you have, Johnathan, but would you be interested in an introduction? And of course, I was fresh out of college, and so that sounded pretty darn amazing to me. And so I was like, yeah, that'd be amazing. Turns out the gentleman, his name was Marty Scott from Gem Records. Gem is notable for their import releases in the 70s. So they were bringing in albums to the U.S. that weren't released here and helping them get wider distribution through record stores. So that was their claim to fame back then. These days, they're kind of a 60s-inspired power pop specializing label. Of course, I knew of them from bands that I loved, like the Gripweeds and the Weaklings, who were kind of the stars of the stable, if you will, at Gem. And turns out Marty was already listening the night before. So before the introduction could be made, he already knew the song and was looking me up and da-da-da. So day 1, the song gets played. Day 2, the radio promoter reaches out, and I get in touch with Marty. Day 3, he sent over a record contract, and a dear friend of mine, Bill Sinke, walked through it maybe 8 times with me, front to back. we looked at every letter of every word on this contract, and the following day the ink was dry. So it went from I was planning on a self-release, I had everything in line, to handing the keys of the car over, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors here. As we do, let's listen to a bit of that song, The Girl Next Door, off of his debut album, Straighten Up.
I grew up dreaming about the girl next door. I'd smile and wave, though we never met before. And it's not my fault, I don't have much to say, even though I see her every day. Your face is on Broadway every single day. You're putting on a show, but darling, do you know that I'm tangled up in you and everything you do? Don't walk away from me, Mary Jane. Years went by before our love was found. When I kiss her, she turns me upside down. And it's all my fault that she's in Dage's way. So here I go again to save the day.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics, all written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
He's leaving on a plane from Boston in the morning. You knew this day would come and you didn't need a warning. He's going off to school to master architecture. When he takes off tomorrow, who will protect you? Now is the time. Don't wait another day. Isabella, take my hand. What do you say? You drop him off and
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, across the podcast desk for me, Johnathan Pushkar is here. We left off before the break the record deal, and that has connotations sometimes that aren't so pleasant for the artist. It doesn't matter who the artist is, who the label is. There's always someone that's going to be happy, and there's always someone that's going to be unhappy. And you mentioned Bill Sinkay, who, if you've listened to this podcast, we did an episode with Bill, and of course he's played with Neil Diamond and just about everybody else, and is a legend in the industry. A fellow bassist, which I always like. Was this an opportunity that you felt could not be passed up? I mean, oh my gosh, I'm being offered a record deal. You know, this is so cool, I should sign it. Or did Bill and or you employ some common sense in the process and go, okay, let's really think about this. Does this make sense? Were you even looking for a record deal at that point?
That is an amazing question, and I'll touch on all of that. So to start with Bill, we walked through the contract and made sure everything made sense. You know, for, I guess, privacy reasons, I guess the particulars don't need to be discussed. No. We both agreed that the contract is in the artist's favor. Of course, the record label is always going to take their part. That's what they serve.
That's how they make their money.
That's how they make their money, just like anything. But we both agreed that at the end of the day, it was in the artist's favor. And so anybody out there that's listening that may have an opportunity like this come up at some point in their career, you know, there's always going to be some kind of give and take, whether you're signing a contract with a management company, with a, you know, distribution company. There's so many facets that it can take in today's music industry, but making sure that the deal makes sense for you is important. Forget about the glitz and glamour of, I signed a record deal, I have a manager, I have a da-da-da. All of these things are nice, but does it make sense for you? And a big thing that I talk about in my career with music and with Lego and with social media, all three of those things kind of combine into what I do. I like to talk a lot about defining success for ourselves, because I think that we look at society and we think that success is one thing. It's the nice car, it's the big house, it's the this, that, and the other. Maybe not even material things, but we have a generally societally programmed idea of what success needs to be. And sure, there are things like having food in the fridge and keeping the lights on that, you know, I would probably argue are good baselines of success. But when you're talking about what's inside in your heart, what's going to make you successful, that's going to differ for every single person that's listening to this show right now. And so for me, what my definitions of success were when it came to music is I wanted to consistently hear my songs on Little Steven's Underground Garage, which I'm very grateful to say to this day continues to happen.
Did you even think that was going to happen when you started down that path?
No.
Because you set, I guess, somewhat of a goal to yourself of, okay, the record deal's nice, but I'd love to hear my music on this particular Sirius XM channel.
Right. And so for artists out there listening, though, I don't want you to think that hearing your song on Sirius Radio needs to be success. That's what it is for me. If yours is, you know, touring, headlining, opening for your favorite act, success can literally be whatever it is that you want.
Couch concerts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If success is just paying the bills, doing nothing but music and music-related things, that's fine. There's no right or wrong answer to what success can be for you, because only you can define it. But I think it's important to think about that as early as possible, because if you know what success looks like for you, you can take calculated steps to help you get there. So I knew for me that a big success, as I mentioned, was Little Steven's Underground Garage because of what it meant to me as a teenager when I got inspired to do all of this. Another big success point was having my music on vinyl at some point, which I'm very humbled and proud to say happened with my second album. And another big sticking point was, you know, getting to do like cool collaborations and getting to work on just different projects other than, you know, just releasing my own music. And so, for example, Gem Records every year puts out a Celebrates album where we go back and we do one artist a year and we celebrate their legacy through covering their songs in our style. So in 2020, it was John Lennon, which was awesome for me. In 2021, it was Brian Wilson, which was like mind-blowing.
There's
It's
your twofer. You got them both.
yeah, picking Beach Boys songs to cover was like the hardest creative decision I've ever made, because it's like, can I just do them all? And then this year is Pete Townsend.
Wow.
So yeah, very, very different. We already know next year's too, but you know, the Gem Records sniper lasers would be coming out if I said it. But next year's is like even more of a further step of crazy. Like, wow, okay. But that being said, those were two of my big goals, and then of course the third being just getting to work on cool collaborative projects. So for me, I certainly don't want to make it sound like I've had all the success I wanted already, but I'm living in my zone of success. You know, the things that I want are in orbit around me, and that's an incredibly humbling and gratifying place to wake up in every day.
When we talk about that kind of that orbit of success that you're in, and the independent label, and sometimes we have to be careful because the connotation of when we say independent label, you kind of go, ooh, you know. Well, I've worked at a couple independent labels that actually had major distribution, and we were accomplishing the same goals that a lot of the majors were at that time. So an independent label is not necessarily a bad thing. With that being said, it's the right independent label and having the right team in place. What should that artist be looking for when they're looking at that independent label?
Yeah, that is the takeaway, guys. That is the takeaway. If you're listening to this wondering more about record labels for you and your career, that's it. You have to find the one that makes the most sense for you. For example, Garth Brooks probably would not do well on a small independent label. He needs a major just because of the level of, you know, coverage, distribution, what have you, that's needed. But somebody that's just up and coming, maybe a major works because they want to break them and, you know, really skyrocket them to the top. Or maybe an independent works for now to get them from one step to the next. It's hard to say because there's really no one size fits all for everybody.
Right. So what should you be looking for?
So if I can use myself for an example, I had defined what those success markers meant for me. And so
you're really creating your own success markers, or you should be.
I think having those defined and then knowing what you're reaching for is a great way to do it. And I apply this in the music business, and maybe even more so outside of the music business, is I think you can really make a lot of life decisions on a kind of a binary choice of, does this get me closer to what I want or further away? Sometimes maybe the answer is stagnation. It's not really going to matter. But when it comes to big decisions like a record label, a tour, you can definitely think, okay, if my goal is, to use myself for an example,
fill in the blank.
Yeah, if my goal is to hear myself on Sirius XM radio channel 21, then does it make sense for me to sign a record deal with a label that has a relationship there and consistently gets their artists played there? The answer would be yes. If my goal was to own 100% of everything related to my music, to every I that could be dotted and T that could be crossed, and I didn't care about radio play, then any record deal would make no sense for me in that scenario. So defining what it is that you want and knowing that that's kind of your beacon that you want to keep coming back to. You want to keep getting closer and closer to whatever that is, or once you're there, you want to stay there.
Right.
Making decisions based on, does this take me further away, closer, or keep me at where I want to be?
When you first started putting your current album together, which is Compositions, which if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the album sitting right here in front of me. Kind of looks like a little composition book, actually.
Exactly.
Which is neat in its own right. The music that you started to write for this, how soon after your Straighten Up album did you start going, okay, I'm ready to start the next adventure, which is working on the new project?
Would you believe me if I literally told you the day after the first album came out?
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't want to lose any momentum. I wanted to be in that zone of creativity and keep tapping in. And of course, my first album came out at the end of September 2019. So let's just say I started writing the next album at the end of September.
Yeah.
Not a lot of runway from that time to the lockdowns. Certainly not enough time to get an album recorded, put out, da-da-da.
Did you find that you had enough of a library in you, not necessarily pen to paper, but did you have an idea of what you were going to write and what you're going to record at that point?
I knew that it was going to have a little bit more of a Nashville thumbprint, if you will, just because...
Now, when you say Nashville thumbprint...
Yeah. My first album was songs I'd written my whole life up until that point. So there were some songs I wrote in high school. There were some songs I wrote in college. There were some songs I wrote right after college. And then compositions, I knew was going to be an album full of songs that would be written post-college and also post-first album. So I knew that there would just be a different vibe right away because I wasn't tapping into something I'd written when I was 17. It was all stuff that would have come out, at the time, basically being written in fall of 2019 onward. So I really kind of liked the vibe of the album that it was taking. Some of the first songs that were written for this album were Making Plans, Does What She Does, which could have fit on the first album for sure. But there are some songs on here that are a little bit more melancholy, a little bit more mature is the way I like to think of this album, because I matured a lot from the 17-year-old Johnathan that was writing on the first album to, the 23, 24-year-old Johnathan that was doing this album. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to put together, but of course the lockdowns threw a curve in, how we were going to do the album. So, we kept pushing back the recording date because let's make sure. Okay. All right. We feel good to get together now. Okay. So we did. And I'm very proud of the way it turned out. I have 2 co-writes on the album with one of my best pals, Steve Rempis, guitar player here in town, plays with me live. And the special guest on the album is Jeff Britton, who played with Paul McCartney and Wings on Junior's Farm, among other songs. And we covered Junior's Farm on the album. So Jeff's only recorded the song twice with 2 artists, once with Sir Paul and once with me. So I think I might be a little bit more excited about that than Paul.
Cool.
But, you know, it is very cool as a Beatle fan.
Putting the album together and coming up with the ideas for the songs, is it relationships that you've gone through? Is it just kind of like life as you see through your looking glass? But how do you come up with these ideas to put these songs together?
So I think if you ask 10 different songwriters, you'll get 11 different answers. For me, I don't like to write songs that I can't tell you about them before or after. I love the idea of playing a live show and you finish one song and say, oh, thank you so much. This next song I wrote when da-da-da. I was inspired to write this one because fill in the blank. And to me, that's the fulfilling part of songwriting, is having a story to go behind it. So there are very few songs in my catalog that I couldn't tell you the whole story of how it came about. Some names may be redacted. But right. That's just my approach to songwriting. I love to keep moments of time kind of frozen in a 3-minute song format. And there are a couple of songs on this album that admittedly I feel like aren't me anymore, but it was at that time. So it's fun to go back and look at who I was at this chapter of life. And I hope to continue that trend as I grow as an artist. And I hope everybody listening gets to experience that too.
Do you keep a journal or a diary or, getting back to those life lessons and going, just this particular phrase I need to write down because this happened to me or it moved me or inspired me. So is that something that you did?
So at January 1, 2020, I decided, you know what, this is going to be the year that I journal every day. I realized that in the hustle bustle of the excitement at the end of 2019 there with my album coming out, that so much happened that I couldn't remember every little detail of everything. So I thought, you know what, let's start fresh on a clean slate. January 1, 2020, new year, new decade. Let's do this. Little did I know how many journal entries that year would be stayed at home today, did the laundry today, But I digress. I'm still on that streak. So here we go, 2022.
That's a big commitment.
It is a big commitment. And I've found that it's really fun to open, for example, the 2021 book. Just pick a page at random and be like, oh, yeah, I remember that day. And I was inspired by Sandy Gennaro, who's a dear friend of mine, drummer with Joan Jett, The Monkees, Pat Travers, so many great acts. And he's been a friend and mentor to me, and he's documented every day of his life. Jeff Britton, who played on this album, another friend and hero of mine, has done it as well. And it's like, man, like these guys I admire so much. This is something that they've done, and I want to do what they've done. So yeah, I've got to do this. And it's hard at first. I think I've only missed 2 days from January 2020 till now. So it's diligence, but, you know, all good things in life come on the other side of diligence.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for another one of our sponsors that really support this show, and we appreciate them. And as we do, we're going to listen to Does What She Does off of the Compositions album. Johnathan Pushkar is our guest here in the studio.
If she does to you what she did to me, then she'll do what she does to anybody. Oh yeah, she did it to me. She's gonna break 100 hearts, and it started when she did it to me. If you take her out around the town, she'll just drag your heart around. Oh yeah, can't you see? She's gonna break 100 hearts, and it started when she did it to me. Pack your bags and get away from her lies. If you don't move now, she'll pull you in and break your heart like the other guys.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilog, the Kronos, Wave State, Op 6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Have you heard the latest news that's going round? Today's the day my girl gets back in town. I'm gonna let her know I'll never let her go. When she gets back in town any second now. Have you heard the talk that's out on the streets? The girl I love is coming back to me. I'm waiting at the train to see my girl again. She'll be back in town.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Johnathan Pushkar is sitting across the table from us. We've talked about your albums, Straighten Up, and played some cuts, and obviously your new album compositions with a couple tracks. We have a nice vinyl copy sitting right here on the desk that I think my wife is going to probably take.
That's okay. She can have the vinyl, you can have the CD.
I'll take the CD. Let's travel down that other path, which is really non-musically inclined, but is just as cool.
And I think that there are takeaways from it, from an entertainment business standpoint, but I'll let you continue.
Legoland. You are... I see you posting things on social media, and you're kind of like a Lego guru of sorts. As a little kid, I'm assuming you played with Legos?
Yeah,
and just never grew up in that aspect.
My whole life. So just to give the quick overview so it doesn't sound like we're going off on a crazy tangent.
No, but we like going off on crazy tangents.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Absolutely. I started a brand called Mini Superheroes Today when I was in college. And my freshman year of college, I was going through a particularly tough time of my life. And I really needed something to kind of help me keep my head up, stay focused on something. And I was really taking an interest in social media. This is March of 2015, which is kind of funny to think that, like, you know, we were still figuring out hashtags and Instagram strategy. Instagram at the time was still chronological, so you needed to know the best time of day to post. Just to give you a for instance of where we were in the world, I needed something to help me through that time, but I also didn't want to, like, say, like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, take up some hobby that isn't going to get me anywhere. Like, I don't want to take up my time doing something that isn't going to benefit me in the long run. And so I thought, okay, I have 7 or 8 Lego figures I brought with me from home just to decorate my desk. I'm going to challenge myself to create a daily post on Instagram using these figures so that I can learn Instagram, photo composition, photo editing, da-da-da. And I started out and the pictures were terrible. They're still up if you really want to scroll back and see them. But I started in March of 2015, and 7 years later, I have never missed a day on Instagram. Now I post about 360 days a year on YouTube and several times a week on TikTok. So between all of those, I create a daily piece of Lego content every day, full stop. It's really fun. It's been amazing to watch these social media platforms grow. Over 250,000 people follow me across the platforms, which is pretty mind-blowing. And I've gotten some really unbelievable opportunities to work with. And I've gotten some really cool opportunities to work with amazing brands like the Ghostbusters IP. I got to do a couple campaigns with K-Swiss Shoes. I've worked with Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, in the social media space. And probably the coolest is Lego themselves. They have a program called the Lego Ambassador Network. And it's a lot of things depending on what you do in the Lego space. But the best way I like to explain it is it's kind of a influencer platform, if you will, for somebody like me, that it's our direct communication with Lego, where we do product launches throughout the year, early set reviews, press releases, so on and so forth. And, you know, as a kid that's been building Lego basically since as long as I can remember, it's pretty amazing to be in that position where, like, I'm on the books with Lego, so to speak.
What is probably the most intricate piece that you've built? Because my son Devin in Texas, he and his girlfriend, they kind of live in that Lego world. She does especially, and I've seen some of the sets that she's put together, and I'm like, I couldn't do that. What has probably been the most complicated one for you?
The complicated build or the process behind it? Because I have 2 different answers.
Let's talk about both of them.
Okay. The most complicated build was the Taj Mahal. It's massive. It would take up, 2/3 of the table we're sitting at right now. The reason it was so complicated is I bought it used, so all of the pieces were in giant bags, and the Taj Mahal was basically one color. So I did buy it right before the lockdowns happened, so I had plenty of time to work on it, which was a benefit. It was a good distraction, but that was the most complicated.
Oh my gosh, how did you figure that out?
To this day, I still wonder.
Did you have an instruction manual?
Yes, yeah, I did have the instructions. I even had the box. It was just disassembled when I bought it.
Oh my gosh.
But as far as the most complex build as the story behind it goes, that actually happened earlier this year. So unsurprisingly, with my music influences, I'm a huge, huge Elvis fan. Big time. And Lego reached out to me earlier this year and said, hey, we have an Elvis mosaic set coming out where it's called an art set, but you take 1x1 Lego studs and you build this giant frame, and there are 3 different headshots of Elvis you build. So when you hang it on the wall and take a couple steps back, there's the king. There's a 50s headshot, a 60s headshot, and a 70s. And they said, we've reached out to 4 creators who we think would do something really interesting with this, and we know your background and your interests, and we would like to offer you the opportunity to do whatever you want with this set. And like, you know, I just picked my jaw up off the floor last week because I'm like, it's my 2 favorite things, the King and Lego. Yeah. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I've been given full access to anything I want. Like, I can use the Lego logo, I can do anything. And I'm like, okay, I live in Music City, and Elvis recorded here at Columbia Studio B. So it's like, so I got in touch with Studio B, and they said, it sounds like a wonderful project, but we're going to pass. My idea was to film a promotional video and a review video on the X where Elvis recorded here in Nashville. So I'm like, all right, well, where do I go from here? And I'm thinking, okay, I could do this, And a gentleman named Steven Schutz, who's a Elvis collector that I was put in contact with, said, dude, you should just go for the gold and call Graceland and see what happens. And I'm like, there's no way. And he goes, see what happens. You're probably right. There's no way. But
if you don't make the call, you don't know.
I was caught in my own trap because honestly, like, we started off this conversation and I said that, you know, I don't like to say no for other people. You have to ask. And that was this experience was a big turning point for me in this, because it showed me that you just don't know. So here's where the story gets crazy. Lego offers me this on a Saturday, I believe it was. So nobody's in the offices over the weekend. So I get the offer on Saturday. On Monday, I talk to Steven Schutz, who suggests Graceland. I call Graceland, and I'm talking with a woman there in the PR department. She says, you're not going to believe this, but we were just talking about that Elvis Lego set coming out, and we're thinking, what can we do here at Graceland to celebrate that set?
Oh my gosh.
And we had no ideas, so we just shelved it, and then you called that same day. She said, there are a lot of clearances I have to have made. There are a lot of yeses I have to get, but give me 24 hours. That takes us to Tuesday. I'm like waiting on the telephone, like, what is going on? And Memphis is about 3.5 hours from here in Nashville. So she says, yeah, it's looking pretty good. Not sure. So I call my dad, who's a photographer. And I'm like, Dad, here's what's going on. And he said, okay, I'm going to book a Southwest flight to come down just in case. If everything falls through Southwest, I'll have the credit. It's fine. But I just want to be ready. Wednesday comes around and they said, can you be here Friday morning at 10? So I'm like, okay. So we confirmed it Friday morning at 10. And I'm like, okay, is there anything else crazy I can do in Memphis with this Lego set? And I'm like, you know what? I've got momentum going. Why not? I called Sun Studio and I said, is there a portion of this that we can connect on that we can do at Sun? And they said, you're not going to believe this, but we were talking about this Elvis Lego set and weren't sure how we could connect with it. And they said, why don't you come in between tours on Sunday and you can have the studio for an hour?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, okay, this is happening. It went from, you know, a week before, oh, there's an Elvis Lego set coming out, can't wait to buy that, to Lego saying, we want you to be a part of this rollout, to I'm going to Graceland and Sun Studio. So I go to Graceland and I got to talk with Matt Abruzzo, who is, he's the representative for Elvis Presley. Basically, any piece of merchandise with his name or signature on it goes through him. So he had a direct hand on working on this Lego set, and he just happened to be at Graceland this weekend. So I got to interview him about the process of working on this Lego set, and we got to talk with the head archivist of Graceland. Angie is her name, absolutely amazing, and she told me about how they went through the process of picking the pictures that they did and working with Lego, and just unbelievable. And then at Sun Studio, they gave us the studio for an hour, and I actually like reviewed the set and said it has this many pieces. Here were some of the building challenges, da-da-da. But it turned out Sun Studio had an opening that night, which is unbelievably rare for the studio to not be booked. They book it basically 7 days a week, but they were open that night. And I was able to record a cover of That's All Right, Mama on the X where Elvis recorded it. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So it was an incredible experience, and it's so cool to talk about after the fact. But that week, like, my hair was falling out. There were so many, calls back and forth. Is it happening? Is it not happening? And then it did happen. And all of it, circling back, is because I made that phone call. And you just don't know what can happen if you ask. You just don't know.
As we wrap things up here, how can people get a hold of you, get a hold of your music, all those really cool things?
Sure. So I'm Johnathan Pushkar, Johnathan, Pushkar, Pushkar, and I'm everywhere that you could possibly find me. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, JonathanPushkar.com, all of those wonderful places. And I'd love to hear from you. If you reach out to me and tell me that you listen to this show, I'll have a super surprise for you that's only for people that made it to this point, because it'll tell me that you listened to the whole show.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Bob, I've gotten to know you over all these years, and we've had so many great talks about the business and everything, but to come here and be a part of your world on the podcast is such a huge honor, and it's just, I'm so grateful to be here. You've been an amazing interviewer, and thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.